What would you do if you had to face a giant, a literal, unstoppable giant armed with nothing but a sling and a few stones? Could you even imagine standing your ground? What if the fate of your people depended on it? Today we're diving into one of the most extraordinary stories in history. How a simple shepherd boy, David, defeated the world's greatest giant, Goliath. But before we jump in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications for City on a Mountain, your go-to place for inspiring stories and timeless lessons from history. You won't want to miss the inspiration we've got lined up for you. Goliath, the fearsome giant. Our story begins with the Philistines, Israel's long-standing enemies, gathering their army to attack. On one side of the valley stood the Israelites, on the other side, the Philistines, and right in between them was Goliath. Goliath wasn't just any warrior. He was the stuff of nightmares, standing nearly 10 feet tall, covered in bronze armor, and carrying a spear so heavy it could probably crush a man just by resting on him. His armor alone weighed more than some men, and his shield was carried by someone else because of its sheer size. For 40 days, Goliath came out to the battlefield and taunted the Israelites. Every morning and evening, he would shout, "Who will fight me? Send out your best warrior. If he wins, we'll be your slaves, but if I win, you'll serve us." He did this day after day, mocking, ridiculing, and terrifying the Israelites. And guess what? No one dared to fight him. Not even King Saul, the tallest man in Israel, wanted to step up. Can you imagine the fear spreading through the Israelite camp? Goliath wasn't just a giant. He represented an unbeatable challenge, a force too great for any man to stand against. David, the unlikely hero. While Goliath was terrorizing the Israelite army, David was miles away tending his family's sheep. Who was David? Just a teenager, the youngest of 8 brothers. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained in battle. He wasn't supposed to be a hero. David was a shepherd, a humble young boy tasked with looking after sheep in the hills of Bethlehem. But when his father Jesse sent him to deliver food to his brothers who were fighting in King Saul's army, David stumbled upon something much bigger than he expected. When David arrived, he saw Goliath for the first time, mocking and taunting the Israelites. He couldn't believe his ears. This Philistine was defying not just the Israelite army, but God himself. David wasn't intimidated like the others. He was outraged. He couldn't stand to see Goliath disrespecting his people and his God. He asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's brothers thought he was crazy. They told him to go back to the sheep. They accused him of being arrogant, but David wasn't going anywhere. He believed that this was more than a battle between 2 men. It was a battle between good and evil, right and wrong, faith and fear. And he had a deep, unshakable faith that he was meant to be part of it. David's faith and courage. David approached King Saul, the leader of the Israelite army, and told him that he would fight Goliath. Saul must have been shocked. Here was a young shepherd, not even old enough to serve in the army, volunteering to fight the most feared warrior in the world. Naturally, Saul tried to discourage David. He told him that Goliath had been a warrior since his youth, while David had no experience in battle. But David told Saul about his experiences as a shepherd. He explained how he had fought off lions and bears to protect his sheep, and that God had delivered him from those beasts. He believed with all his heart that God would deliver him from Goliath too. Still skeptical, Saul offered David his own armor, but after trying it on, David realized it wasn't for him. He wasn't used to heavy armor and bulky weapons. Instead, he chose to rely on what he knew best, a sling and 5 smooth stones he picked up from a nearby stream. Here's where it gets interesting. While Goliath relied on brute strength, size, and weapons, David's greatest weapon was his faith. He knew that this wasn't just a physical fight, it was spiritual. And David was ready to put everything on the line, trusting that God would deliver him. The battle David versus Goliath, and then the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. David stepped out onto the battlefield to face Goliath. The sight was ridiculous. This young boy with no armor, no sword, just a sling, standing against a giant whose mere presence struck fear into the hearts of soldiers. Goliath was insulted. He couldn't believe the Israelites had sent a boy to fight him. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" he mocked. He cursed David, saying he would feed him to the birds and wild animals. But David wasn't scared. In fact, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he called out, "You come against me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." With those words, David took one of the stones from his pouch, placed it in his sling, and swung it around. The stone flew through the air with lightning speed and struck Goliath right in the forehead. It hit so hard that Goliath fell face first to the ground. Silence. The entire battlefield went still. David then ran over to Goliath, took the giant's own sword, and used it to cut off his head. The giant was dead. Just like that, the impossible had happened. A shepherd boy had defeated the greatest warrior of his time. And not only did David win, but his victory inspired the Israelite army to charge forward, defeating the Philistines in battle. The lessons we can learn from David's victory. So, what does this ancient story teach us today? Why does the story of David and Goliath continue to inspire millions of people around the world? Faith over fear. David's faith wasn't blind. It was rooted in experience and trust in God. He knew that with God on his side, no challenge was too great. Goliath represents the giants in our lives, those overwhelming challenges that seem impossible to overcome. David shows us that with faith, even the biggest giants can fall. Use your strengths. David didn't try to fight Goliath with armor and a sword, tools he wasn't familiar with. He relied on what he knew, a sling and stones. Sometimes the key to overcoming obstacles is to lean into the skills and strengths you already have. Courage is contagious. When David defeated Goliath, it didn't just change the course of his life, it inspired an entire army. Courage is contagious. When we step up and face our giants, we inspire those around us to do the same. The power of underdogs. David's story reminds us that you don't have to be the biggest, strongest, or most experienced to make a difference. Sometimes, the most unlikely person is the one who changes the world. David's victory over Goliath wasn't just about defeating a giant. It was about showing the world that faith, courage, and determination can overcome any obstacle. If you found inspiration in this story, make sure to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need a little encouragement today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to City on a Mountain for more incredible stories of courage and faith that will inspire you to face your own giants. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.